Are you seeing a notice that we're recording? Right. Okay, so this is take your mics off mute when you want to speak. We are doing this as a group of facilitators having a conversation about teaching plant identification, so that people who are wanting to use the plant association guides can build the skills that they need to have to be able to identify plants in the field. So I know a lot of you have a lot of experience in doing this kind of thing. So I really hope to shut up and learn a lot from you guys as well. If you are one of those folks that have multiple monitors, go ahead and pull up your favorite websites, etc., where you go for information or pictures of books that you really like to use and stuff like that. And we'll be sharing the screen a lot today to talk about some of the resources that we like to use. So, in our plant association world, we generally collect information about the plants and organize it on our field forms in four major categories. And we know that all the plants don't fit in those four categories, but we talk about trees and we talk about shrubs and we talk about grasses and we talk about forbs. So, what is the word herb? What does that refer to? Anybody remember that?
Non-woody, non-grass species.
It's non-woody, so an herb would include both your grasses and your forbs. So we tend to separate them into grasses and forbs, but then we start lumping things in with them. So we'll put all of the like grass-like plants into the graminoid category. Basically, we'll call it a graminoid category instead of a grass category. And what are some of those things that look like grasses but aren't?
Sedges.
Sedges.
Sedges. Sedges have edges. Yeah, sedges, rushes, scirpus. So, there are things that bulrushes, we'll lump them in with the graminoids, even though they aren't true grasses. So, then there are things in the shrub category. We tend to think about that shrub category. We don't necessarily list it this way, but we think about it as our shrubs and our sub-shrubs. So when I say a sub-shrub, what does that make you think of?
Yucca.
Yeah, or cactus, yeah. Or just things that are diminutive, like Oregon grape. It may look more like a four, but it has a woody base. Linnea borealis, the twin flower, is a shrub. Mountain lover is a shrub, but these are sub-shrubs, like kinnick. They'll tend to be very low stature. And a lot of times when we talk about shrubs, you're thinking about, something that's more eye level. So, and then the trees are generally up for like there will be different species that we will some days as in plant associations call a tree, and in other sites we'll call them shrubs. So it's really more about what they are doing in the plant community in terms of whether we call gamble oak like a tree or a shrub. So we're not necessarily using the SAF definition of a tree, or the FIA list of trees to determine, whether we're going to fit something in as a tree or a shrub. It's more if it's the dominant woody species, it may be in our tree list. If it's an understory, and we've got towering trees above it, it will be a shrub. So we're pretty loose with that as well. Yuccas and things like that get listed on our shrub list. Um, and then the grasses are, gosh, they're hard. They're hard to identify. They're hard to really get to know well, but they're so essential. The grasses are so good at telling us about the environment and the ecosystem that they're worth the effort, is basically the way I look at grasses. So when I'm going out into a site, the first thing I do is I make a heading on my sheet of paper for trees, shrubs, grasses, forbs, and I start writing down the species I see. On the trees, I'm also doing one more thing, which is documenting which trees are regenerating. So in the Plant Association world, we use the term regeneration extremely loosely. If there are no seedlings present, we don't say there's no regeneration. We start looking at the saplings, and that's what's regenerating. If there's no seedlings or saplings regenerating, we're just looking at the youngest group of trees, and we say that's what's regenerating. So what we're looking for in this list of what trees are regenerating is we're looking for that successional pathway of if there is a more shade tolerant tree that could be dominating the site later on, we want to be able to spot it by looking at the regeneration. Does that make sense? So the trees, being able to identify the trees, that's essential. Anybody who's out there taking the plant association class needs to end the week being very good at their tree identification. Um, the shrubs are vital. They may not know every shrub, but they definitely can key in on the indicator plants and they at least know what shrubs they need to know. If they can't tell you exactly the difference between a false mock orange and a mock orange, they know that they're out there. The grasses are hard, but they're really worth the effort. And then the forbs are the big category where there are so many of these plants out there that in the plant association class, we really have to work with our participants to stay focused on the indicator plants, because otherwise you're spending the whole week in the field identifying everything that's out there, and that's not really the goal of what we're trying to do here. But because you are, for a lot of folks attending the class, maybe introducing them, to the joy of botanizing and how much fun it is, um, you don't want to shut that down either. So it helps to indulge a little bit on plant ID, especially if there's a real cool plant out there and not, but when it gets out of hand, you have to be able to pull everyone back and say, yeah, that's a pretty flower, but it's not an indicator. We got to move on, kind of thing. So, does that make sense? So when I sent out the list of plants, I think I sent them in a couple of different formats. Generally, if it's an indicator plant, we we tend to use that term indicator plant, meaning that it is in the name of the plant association, or it is an important plant that it's listed in the key to get to that plant association. But then we also have a group of plants that are in the descriptions of the plant communities. And so it's helpful to know those plants as well. But as long as you know the indicators, you can work through the keys successfully and be able to identify the plant association. So the selling point and kind of the reason that plant associations were developed as a management implication tool was that you could teach a small set of plants to a group of natural resource managers and they could reliably identify the plant associations by knowing the subgroup of plants, and that they didn't have to be full-fledged botanists knowing every plant out there. And so that is the minimum kind of goal we have with each of our participants that show up and want to know these plants. So I thought maybe we could start just by going through these four categories and talking about resources that we've used or experiences that we've had or sharing stories about identifying these plants. And I'm going to open the floor. I'd love to see a bunch of hands go up. Okay, Jack. He may not be listening. There you
Yeah,
are.
which Jack are you looking for?
You.
Me.
You
Okay.
always have a good story about plants.
Well, I was going to figure out how I could share, um,
It's
but I
next
like
to the
the
leave button. Try not to leave us, but
okay, I'm there.
it's
There's share. I just have to get my uh, figure out how to do it. Turn it out. No. Well, I like to do when I'm out is also let some of the people know that in New Mexico, especially, you've got traditional plants that were used for medicinal purposes. And sometimes you can use people by playing with that a little bit to pull into there's if you can see that. Okay, there's one picture of things I use. Some of them are old. If you happen to find this one where the arrow is going around a field guide to forest plants from South Central Colorado, it's a very handy book. It's out of print. You might find one laying around someplace. These other two, the range grasses, are available electronically. These two came out in 1950, which is nice to have around. Let's see if I can go to the next one. That's twisted, but I like to use those. They're picture books. And if you're over at Philmont, pick up the Philmont Field Guide. It's worthwhile.
oh, thank you.
And let's see if I can get to the next picture. Oh, come on.
And
I've
I
got
think we're
one more.
seeing your file if that was what you planned to share with
Well,
us.
the pictures anyway, if they're there. If not, it's the file.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah.
Let's see if this will come up. And it's upside down, but you'll have to pardon me. Let's see. I can, yeah. Okay, okay. It's upside down, but what I use those for talking about plants and trying to, since work with a lot of private landowners, right now I try and just kind of grab hold of them with something. If I've got a medicinal plant that helps, if I turn around and latch on to a big uh, a bigger plant, but I just try and grab them and pull them into what we're talking about in a general sense. And it's fun to watch their eyes light up as you talk about plants and how the plants are interrelated. You've got the overstory, you've got the ground plants. It's just fun to watch. And eventually, when we get enough private landowners tied in, doing some of the management activities becomes so much easier. So, so I'll let you go to somebody else at this point for a few minutes.
Yeah. One of the resources that I use quite a bit to learn more about plants is the fire effects information system. So I'm just gonna share my screen and show that to you. How many folks have used that before? Have you seen this? Yeah, so you're familiar with it, and you can enter a species. Since I said trees, let's just look at the two needle pinon, and then you'll end up with a different page for introduction, distribution, botanical, ecological characteristics, fire ecology, fire effects, management considerations, references. And so, pretty much all of our plants in North America, or the majority of the ones that are important to us in terms of resource management, I have found them in here. And it's like a summary of the existing um, references. And then when you go to the references, they're all there. So all of the information that you find in the stuff, like if you're looking at fire ecology, each discussion of fire ecology has is tied to references and that type of thing. So I find it's a really useful tool for me. So I'll stop sharing and pass it off to Grace.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one of the resources I have found really useful is the New Mexico Wildflowers app. I have that on my phone, and it really helps me to narrow down. I guess I'll share my screen. Just what I'm looking at. And then I've also learned a lot about, I don't have a background in botany, but it's really helped me just like learn a little bit more about how to identify certain plants. And then I was going to say, it's also been really helpful for me when I find what I think an association may be, just to look at the associated either indicator species or just species that are found in similar locations, and then look those up, like look up the ID. And so I've kind of
Yes.
learned backwards and forwards in that way. And that, I mean, has been probably the best. I remember doing FIA plots in Oregon, and the indicator species are like, there's like 200 plus that you have to figure out. And I would just like find the association and then look at what was expected to be found. And most times that was very helpful.
No, I think that is awesome. So like for example, here is our woodland guide. And the plant list, let's look and see. We're looking at the border pinon evergreen sumac. So let's say you end up in Tucson to put together a plant association class because John Capilano invited you down, and you've never seen the plants that are in this particular ecosystem. You can go look them up and get familiar with them. And then when you get out there, you already have an idea of what it is that you might be finding. So these plant lists can be, like Grace is saying, used forwards and backwards. We go out there, we make a list of plants we see, and then we go look for the plant community, but we can also look at plant communities we expect to find and look at the plant list and start getting familiar there. Thank you. Jack, let me stop sharing. Oh, I'm not sure I was sharing. Okay. Jack,
Yes, ma'am.
your hand was up.
Oh, it was for a minute, but I also carry one of the wildflower apps on my phone that I use on occasion. But my preference is to look at some things, and if I'm not sure, I'll pull out a couple picture books, especially I'm with a landowner, and again, I'm trying to draw the landowner in to knowing some more about their property, and it just helps. So I'll put my hand down. So go ahead. to the next person.
All right, Robin.
Sorry, I'm in the field, so I will not be sharing my screen. I start by using the GIS FIA database. So that's going to give you sort of a good approximation of what the area is. And then I'm overlaying that in Swery's Twig database viewer, where they've been doing recent management. Other things that you can use that'll be helpful on your phone, you can have the Virginia Tech tree guide and download that for the area that you're in, which will have most of the trees and a good number of the shrubs for an area with photos and ways to identify them. And then also picture this. So if you're in the field and you don't have a cell service, you can snap a photo and then the smart function will help you ID it when you get back or get you close. It's not always correct, but it'll help you build out a database that you have on your phone.
Cool. John.
Hi. Yeah, I use CNET a lot, and I'll share my
CNET?
screen. CNET, SEINET. It's a web page. Let's see if this one works. That should be. So it's southwestbiodiversity.org. And there's for Arizona and New Mexico. There's also a Utah, Nevada, all the other chapters. But I use this one a lot, even though they don't necessarily agree with a lot of the stuff in plants database. But I do find that you can do this dynamic flora, and you could set a point, and then it'll give you a checklist of all the plants that are in that area. So I do that a lot I'm out on a plot in the middle of someplace I haven't been quite often. Then I could at least drop a point and see what plants should be growing there. And then I'm not a botanist either. I go through and come up with those, go through the list as best as I can, cut out what I know definitely isn't there, and then just go from plant to plant, basically.
That is cool.
I also built a whole bunch of guides, Arizona oaks for telling us how to differentiate all of our tally species. I did the indicator species one, just so when we're out there and we don't have coverage, we could have it on our phone and pull it up.
Can you open that up? I see you're hovering over it.
Oh, yeah, this is, yeah. And I made them as non-scientific as possible. So I like pictures rather than when I got to identify something. I don't want to have to hear like all the uses and stuff. I just need the words that tell me how to identify the plant.
Right. So is that something you'd be willing to just kind of reply to all and share those?
I did. I sent it in an email in a zip, and if it didn't come through, I could share them other ways. But I tried getting all the plants in the indicator guide in there.
Right.
Because there were a bunch that I'd never even seen before, and I figured I might as well go through. It can be printed out, but we just keep it as a guide in our book, in our phone or something. So I have one for each. Oh, are you seeing that, or is that on the wrong side?
Yeah.
Hey, get out of there. Just cancel. All right. I think that was most of the other books were people had listed too that I use. I have the Ivy, I have Kearney and Peebles, Flora. A lot of those are so outdated now, but that's what I use.
Great. And this might be a good chance if Erica is on to have Erica talk to us a little bit about the flora neo-mexicana. Oh, Erica, your hand is up too. So anything else you
Yeah.
want to talk about as well? But thank you for
Well,
sending that out.
yeah, now I feel like I'm scooping on Robin, who's got their hand up, but um I was just going to piggyback on John to say that it's SciNet, not and it's actually this is our Southwest Herbaria Consortium. This is their database, so it's all of the scanned specimens that are like from Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. There might be some other ones, but um, so you can see the specimens that are housed in our local area, and you can see the specimens, the pictures of them, and you can read the labels. But I was just going to show how and the dynamic search that John was showing is a great way to, like, if you know you're going to go in the field or you go to a certain place, to like draw up a species list for where you're going to go. And then I'll just show how I use it for a lot of things. Um, let's see. You seeing my screen yet?
Not yet.
Okay. Oh, here we go. So
Okay.
if you go to SciNet, and it looks like Jess dropped the hot link into the chat for this. So you can go to search. So if you think you've got something, well, then you can go to search collections. And so maybe I just typed in Eriogonum elatum, or it'll show all the Eriogonums. And so maybe I want to see if Eriogonum elatum grows in the area that I'm currently in. I mean, depending on if you have internet service or when you go back to the office. So then I hit search, and this will show all the specimens that are in the surrounding herbaria. But what I like to use is I go to maps, and then you can go click on I want to display where all the known locations that have actual specimens. This is just from specimens. So then you can zoom way in to see where people have made actual determined identified specimens of Eriogonum elatum, and then you can click on one of these points and see who collected it. So the collector was A. Nelson in 1932. This will be the actual scanned specimen, and you can open a big fat file to like zoom way in and see all the great cool detail of this plant and maybe compare
Wow.
to what you've got. You can see what the herbarium label says. The more recent ones are more useful because they'll list like this was found on the north facing slope of whatever, and maybe hopefully list some associated plants. So this is a great tool. So I definitely concur with using this as another resource that I should have mentioned too. And Mary, you wanted me to talk about the Flora Neo Mexicana
Yeah, but before
series?
you leave that, I'd like you to look up Erigeron eczemus, EXIMUS,
Oh,
because that is one of our most challenging um indicator plants because it looks like so many other Erigerons. And I know I spent
hmm.
a lot of time in herbariums, 20, 30 years ago getting to know it. So
Original, what did you say?
EXIMUS, MIUS, yeah.
Huh.
So so there you guys
Sometimes it gets a
go.
little glitchy. I don't know why. They're having some
Right.
technology issues lately. Um, hmm. So there's lots of specimens. Like
There's
if you
lots of
went,
specimens. And one
yeah,
of the things that I noticed even back then was that the names, someone would be working on them and come in and change the name, and then someone would come back and change it back. And that there is a lot of confusion between these very similar species. And so a lot of times what we focus on when we're in the field is maybe we can't identify this plant 100% confidence, but we can identify the plant community with that kind of confidence, and we can get to know some of the characteristics of this plant and say, yeah, it looks like it could be here, but these are the other things about this plant community that help us know that we're in this. But it is what we name several of our plant communities after, is this forest fleabane or
Yeah.
spruce fir fleabane now.
Yeah. And a lot of these plants too, this is becoming more common. There'll be some photographs as well. So this is kind of handy to look at what the herbarium has for submitted photographs. So that's
Nice.
nice. But that's the lovely world of botany and the ever-changing fights over splitters and lumpers and taxonomy, the constant ebb and flow of naming something. So I don't know what the current status of this one is, but do you write like, CF before a species, Mary, and some of the when you're writing a species list is like, I think it's this, and but not
Right.
sure.
Yeah, or SPP question mark or
Or yeah.
but one of the things to keep in mind is that we're looking at the plants the way our researchers who develop the plant communities were looking at the plants, which, nowadays we have the benefit of all this DNA analysis, and we have some species that have been lumped together now, and we have other places where what we thought was one species has been split out. And an example of this is the Arizona white oak and the gray oak. And so, are they separate species or not? From a plant community standpoint, we have a like a ponderosa pine Arizona gray oak or white oak and a ponderosa pine gray oak, and they're different plant communities. And so we're kind of hanging on to that split, even though that they've talked about putting them all together in one species. So it's kind of like we've got a little historical stuff going on as well when we start talking about these plant communities as they've been identified. Nerdy stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
so can you also talk about the flora?
So Kelly Allred, with the help of lots of others, but he came up with several years ago the Flora Neo-Mexicana series. He's got, if you want something specific to the Jornada Plain, but here's the grasses. So I think somebody mentioned that. But you can on his website, Kelly, you can download all these resources for free. And I have them on my phone when I'm out in the field, but that's your choice if you want to read teeny tiny dichotomous keys out in the field, which is not super fun, but I do not carry books anymore. So these are great. So this one you can download for free, the grasses. So he's retired now. He used to be a faculty member of NMSU. He was a grass taxonomist, but he's now written The Bryophytes of New Mexico, along with Russ Kleinman and Karen Kleinman, and the dicots and the monocots of New Mexico. So those you can download just the checklist of all our plants here in New Mexico, or you can download there's a illustrated manual with maps, which, like range maps, like what counties they've been observed in, which I find super helpful. Like, oh yeah, this yucca is only in Northwestern. I'm in Southeastern. So, okay, I got to rule that one out. So that's helpful. So anyway, you can download these all for free. Part 1 is monocots, part 2 is dicots. And then you can also buy a physical book from lulu.com. And I sent that email before we got on this call. And they don't make money on these. Like they have these big soft cover books for like $30, I think, or maybe 15. I got this like so incredibly cheap. But that's our, for the botanists in the state, this is our reference. This is our authority for what we, what we have here as a list. And he tries to, the PDFs, the good thing about the PDFs is he keeps these up to date. So if people notice errors, he immediately changes it on the PDF. And if taxonomy changes, he changes the PDF. So that's the good thing about the PDFs as well. So I don't know what else you want me to describe on that.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also mentioned in my Southwest, this I also think it's kind of a clunky homepage, but if you click here and say, okay, I want to look at all the origerons that may also occur in New Mexico. This guy has really put together a phenomenal resource too. So we can scroll down to the origerons. Let's see if he's got that one that you were thinking about. There we go.
Yeah.
And sometimes some really garish colors that make my eyes hurt, but but the photos, he lumps a lot of the similar ones together so that you can kind of scroll down, and he makes notes about comparisons to other species. They're really good commentary, I think. Yeah, compare the details with Eximius and Coulteri. So I think this is a pretty cool website, just as yet one more resource. And I think I also mentioned that the Grace, I think she mentioned this, but a lot of us use iNaturalist, and they're just references, though I always just say, like, use that with a major grain of salt. Like, because the algorithm for iNat, if you're going to load up a photo and you want it to identify it for you, it's going to, if a bunch of other people misidentified it nearby, it's going to suggest that, and nobody's corrected it. I've noticed this several times now, and you think, oh, it's that. But it may not be correct all the time. So it's a great reference and kind of helps you narrow down some things. iNaturalist, that is. But and then because if you take a photograph in iNaturalist and upload it, and then you say you want to observe it and post it to iNaturalist, and then you want it to tell you, first you want it to tell you what it is, it'll give you a bunch of suggestions, and oftentimes they're pretty close. So it's a great place to start. And then that New Mexico Wildflowers app. A lot of us use that again, but it was created. These apps were made for Colorado, Utah, West Texas. I don't know. You probably went beyond. But I've heard that it was some computer dude who is really good at sort of scraping the internet. And so a lot of that data comes from SciNet. And so it's all known collected specimens. So what's great about it is that, if you think you've got something or you want to compare all the origerons near you, you can see the map. Then those maps come from SciNet. So they're not all the known locations, but it's what people have actually collected. So that's great too, to see if it's even been collected where you're standing. So I like the New Mexico Wildflowers app to narrow again down your world. Or sometimes I just cannot remember the specific epithet of some plant. I'm like, I don't know, I think it had, blue in the name or something. So you can even search with, okay, I know it's an origeron, it's got blue in the name. So
Right.
it'll sort of narrow down your world. So those are the things that a lot of us botanists use out in the field.
That's awesome. And Erica, I apologize. We didn't do introductions. We jumped right in. We did introductions last week, but do you mind just sharing a little bit about who you are, what your job is?
Sure. I work with Mary here at MNerd. I'm in the forestry division, and so I'm the state botanist here. And Mary and I have talked about this plant association's training for a while in preparation for her departure. And then somehow we kind of missed two ships in passing in the night or whatever the whatever the phrase goes. But
I just thought you were in the field all the time now.
yeah, well, that is true. But I want to help, whatever way I can. I just was like, I can't take this on entirely, but I can provide assistance in like plant ID or, component of the training. That I used to do these kind of trainings in Minnesota for foresters. We had our own classification there, and and same thing, identifying native, using a list of species and not focusing on the one plant that that everybody wants to like, oh, what's that white flower over there? But it's like there's only one of them. You can't use it as an indicator. So same thing, and we would, teach plant ID to help, inform and classify native plant communities, and to help inform, how management actions, result in different outcomes. Like you cut the forest this way, or you manage it this way, and you're going to have this plant community later. And so we would do the same kind of thing and do field tours, to go look at different communities and try and key things out in the field. So I have some experience in this realm. So if I can assist in whatever way I can, I'm not sure what that looks like, but yeah, so does that
Great.
cover it, Mary?
That's great. And I just want everyone to know that Erica is an amazing resource. So thank you for being here.
Thanks,
Grace.
Erica, thank you so much. I was trying to take notes of all those resources, and I was curious actually if people are interested. I know we've been sharing resources thus far just via email, but if I make a Google folder, can we all just upload documents? And then I'll also make a Word doc if you want to paste links, or we can just put PDFs in there. Mary, is that an okay way to organize?
We have trouble with the state computer system using Google. It's there are ways to get around it, and we can I think we can access documents if they're sent to us as the file name or stuff, but loading things, and it tends to vary by the day what our IT department lets us do with Google. So
Yeah,
it's not always reliable.
we have several Google Docs going between our botany, all like lots of shared partners, because we can't use SharePoint with all the other federal partners. So actually we go around it by using Google Docs or like Google Drives. And I wonder, Gwen is typing something. I wonder if she's going to share something, but so we haven't had, you have to create an account. So maybe, Grace, if you create it and you allow access to all of us, then we can dump stuff in. Because we have ongoing editing stuff with other external partners, and it seems to work fine for us. But I didn't set them up. My employees did. So
Right.
I just shared a link in the chat to the drive, and everyone with the link should have access. And I'll also email it out after today. And so maybe that we can see if that works for people, at least just like to consolidate resources. And I can like host and manage that box. Okay, so it looks like it's working, at least for Peggy. Google Drive works for Gwen. Okay, well, great. I'm gonna keep that open, and if we can just like upload documents to that, or I made a Google Doc already in there. So if people want to put links in the document or upload PDFs, I think that'd be great.
Okay, and for those who say it's working, can you guys try uploading a document and make sure that we can do that? And are federal employees able to get to Google Docs?
I'm not sure. I'm trying right now.
It looks like a couple people from Forest Service. Cool.
But I had to make an account with my federal email with Gmail, if that makes sense to whoever else is federal.
Okay, great. I'm glad we got that worked out. And thank you, Grace, for being willing to be the manager of that.
Yeah, and if anyone has issues uploading documents, you're welcome to just email them to me and then I can upload as well.
Okay. Well, we're running up on our first hour. Is there anything that we haven't talked about in terms of resources out there that you would like to share or that you're familiar with? Or does anyone have any questions about, you know, how it works in the field as you're helping to identify plants? So, yes, Brian.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I may have misunderstood what you were talking about, because I came in maybe mid-conversation, but I believe you were speaking about successful regeneration, kind of before we started talking about the different individual resources that people use.
Um, Maybe not. No, successful
Okay, then.
regeneration like tree species. Oh yeah, because I was talking about when we list trees, we talk about what's regenerating there. And
Right.
so we don't necessarily use some of the standard definitions of regeneration. What we're looking for is, are there more shade tolerant species that have the potential for being more dominant in the site later? And so our when you see on the form what's regenerating, it's like looking for those kinds of successional um potential pathways out there. So instead of saying, well, I didn't see any seedlings or I didn't see any saplings, it's more about, well, what species has the potential to be dominating the site later on?
Okay, so for example, if I'm understanding this correctly, like so, say I'm in a timber stand and I'm looking through my Arizona, New Mexico habitat key, and I see that it says is ABCO present and reproducing successfully. Um, is that what you're talking about when you're talking about
Yeah.
that? And so
Yeah.
when I
So,
look at the
and
definition for that,
reproducing successfully also, it's more like has the potential to reproduce successfully because you very well could have had a forester with an anti-ABCO mentality who wrote a prescription to tell everyone to cut out all of the ABCO in the understory, and but you have evidence that it was there. um, I've seen that actually on the White Mountain Apache Reservation where they basically did an edit of a tree species because the foresters thought it was trash.
well, I believe that may even be what I'm talking about. I was just working on the on the reservation, and I was seeing a site, and I was like, I don't know, it doesn't meet that reproducing successfully definition at the beginning of the guide, but I was like, it seems like an ABCO site to me. There are ABCO here, but they weren't like 5 per acre, or
Right, right. Yeah, no, we have to interpret based on what we're trying to do is we're trying to accurately identify the potential of that site and the so I always try to make a note, like it's absent, and I believe that it was, silviculturally edited, because we can't manage for it if it's not there anymore. But it also tells us that it's a moisture site where we may get a different kind of response from a fire or a different kind of response from other kinds of management activities that are shooting to improve shrub response or things like that. So we're still trying to pick up on the idea that it was an APCO site, but it was so heavily manipulated that you're doing good to find an APCO out there.
okay, so that makes sense. So in that interpretation of that, like to have those definitions, you don't have to fit it into that exact definition,
Yeah,
like
when we're doing the plant associations, we're describing the potential natural vegetation and not the existing natural vegetation. When we
right.
do the national vegetation classification, we're talking about what is actually there at the time.
Okay. Well, thank you for talking about that a little more. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I had made a couple of notes. I just want to go back to them and make sure we've covered things. Um, One of the things that I have found in the field that has been helpful is we talked about these sites like iNaturalist, et cetera, that are kind of crowdsourced. You also have an advantage of crowdsourcing when you're out in the field learning plants. So have your participants learn a language where they can share what they know about the plants. And what I mean by learn a language is they need to be able to share what the plant is based on how sure they are about what they know about it. So you can sit there and say, well, that's a ponderosa pine. And you're all in agreement that yes, that's a ponderosa pine. But let's say you're looking at a ribes and you're saying, well, I think that that is a wax currant. You know that there's multiple species of currants that could occur in the area. It's looking like a wax current to you, but you cannot say definitively it is. It's using language as you're sharing about plants where you are sharing how sure you are about that plant. And so I always try to set that rule on the first day of a class so that as you have people in the field sharing their knowledge, they can be more specific about, I know that that's this, or I think that that's this, or, boy, I just have this like gestalt feeling like this is a blank. And then you can start looking it up on your phone or on your field guides or however you're accessing your references. But it's always important to make sure that as you're setting up the class, that you're setting it up so people can learn from each other, but that they are also learning to be clear about their knowledge. Does that make sense? This is something I do in the field. It makes a lot more sense in the field than on a webinar, but yeah. All right. Anybody else got anything for the good of the order, or is anyone interested in talking about some of the more difficult indicator plants that we have? Robin.
I guess I forgot to bring it up earlier. So
Robin, we just lost you.
Oh, sorry, I'm waiting for my speaker. I use the NRCS database, especially if I'm checking the range of a plant to see if it's there. So
Yeah.
I check to see if white bark pine is in the border regions just west of Bear Lake between Idaho and Utah, and it shows that it's not. And so I went back and checked some of the dead limber pines, hunted around for cones just to make sure I got it correct. But I'm sort of at the real terminus of a range, but I think that's really useful as well. If you've got a group of indicator species, you want to check and make sure they actually exist in the area that you're going to be looking in. So, if you're keying out, make sure you're not hunting through plants that really shouldn't be there in the first place. So yeah, I've been using NRCS and it's been really helpful for the last decade.
Cool. Wish you had your screen to share. Just kidding. Um,
I can share my screen just a second. Hold on. Just a moment. Here's my screen. That's where I'm at.
well, there you are. Okay, Robin, you're muted now. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, sorry, I should have just said, yeah, I think that's the only thing I wanted to add in there, that just, using a couple different tools will sort of help you hone in on, getting into the right range, on the gross and then on down to the micro scale.
Right, and as you bring up the plant database, the NRCS, that kind of brings us to these acronyms, where in the Plant Association Guide, you'll see, if I pull that one back up again that we were looking at earlier, um, maybe I closed it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share this. Um, we use these codes that for the plant association names that use the first two digits of the genus and then the first two digits of the species, and then if that combination has been used before, they will add a number, and the plant database is the source of getting these codes, and the NRCS is the one that assigns these. In the National Vegetation Classification, they use a similar system, but it's the first three letters. So this one would be PINDIS instead of PIDI3. So that's when people ask, well, where do you get the code from? How do you know it's got a three? That's all done through that plant database. Um, People will tend to talk about plants in terms of these codes, and I think that that's really a poor practice. Um, and yet we all fall into it, like Pied Rockland. And Pied is the two needle pinion. So what I like to say is, yeah, go ahead and use the abbreviation for the name of the plant association. But when we're talking about plants, let's try to use either a scientific name or a common name. And then again, that plants database is our source for standardized, and I really hate myself for saying this, standardized common names. The common names, having them standardized has been helpful, as so many of the scientific names have been shifting and changing with more and more research that's being done on these plants. But there are so many beautiful common names that get lost when we start talking about standardizing them, and some of the geographic connections of people to plants to the land get lost when we start standardizing common names. So I totally am not a super fan of standardizing common names across the board, but they're useful for us when we're trying to make sure that we're being clear about what plant we're talking about when it comes to indicator plants. Okay, anything else on plant ID that anyone wants to share for the good of the group? I have a little bit of housekeeping for moving this course forward. Um, Esty and Jack are working on coming up with a date for the next one of these sessions, and they're shooting for the second or third week of July. And then we do have the 23rd of July scheduled as a field day in the field with SD and Jim. And I apologize that it wasn't the most common date for all of you, but it was the date that we could get SD and Jim to the field. So we'll go with whoever can make it then. And then I'll go back to the drawing board to try to find 2 days in August that we can get the most people to for that back-to-back um, how to teach the course field trip where we'll go and we'll talk about how to find sites and we'll talk about um, what makes a good site for a field trip and then how to manage a group to learn to use the guide and learn to identify plants. But the upcoming field trip on the 23rd is going to be like the fourth or fifth day of the class where we really get into the weeds about management implications and some of the connections and ecology informations. But you all are advanced in plant associations, so I figured we did not have to do it in order, and we wanted to take advantage of the time that Jack and Esty can give us. So can I see thumbs up maybe of who plans to go on the 23rd? Okay, so we'll have a couple at least. Great. Perfect. Okay. And then I'll send out they think they'll have a date tomorrow afternoon, so I'll send that out as soon as we have it with an invite, and we'll of course record it for those of you who don't get to make the talk with SD. So what I wanted to throw out there was this is our second session. We're planning 2 field sessions. We're in the midst of planning this next session on the National Vegetation System and also on the ecological response units. What is there some things that you would really like to learn more about, like state and transition models, about management implications? I'm just kind of open to, in terms of getting you prepared to being able to teach classes, what are some of the areas that you can think of right now that you want us pursuing, getting another webinar together on? Kevin.
Yeah, I would like to know a little bit more about how plant associations are first identified. Like, how did we come up with the white fir Gamble Oak Plant Association, or fill in whatever blank? How were those developed?
Okay, that's great because SD is one of the researchers who was at the ground level when all of those were being developed. So we will make him tell us the answer to that question at either his webinar or the field trip. Grace. Okay, you put your hand back down. Anybody else got
Oh,
some?
sorry, Mary,
Okay.
I just didn't unmute myself. I am still perplexed by oak and identifying in what places we're going to have an oak response. we were, Kevin, talking about this on an inspection last week or something like that, and how we could use plant associations to better understand oak release post thinning. So that's very specific. And then the question that I brought up last time we met, I just still think, for me, it's important to understand how plant associations are actually guiding long-term management strategies at scale. So I understand it on a couple of acres with private landowners, but not on this landscape scale. So I'd like more conversation about that and just how we're planning to use plant associations in the future, especially in terms of adaptive management when we're seeing so many forest type changes occur.
Yeah, I think that that is a really good place to have this conversation in a couple of different locations. Um, Hopefully, we get in some good oak stands in the Hamus with Jim. And he definitely has a lot of thoughts about that oak response question. He also has a lot of thinking on the long-term management at scale. So for those of you who don't make that field trip, we'll see what we can do to capture some of the highlights of what comes up out of those conversations. Um, but maybe one of the webinars we can get together before Jim disappears, which is going to be about the middle of August, and he won't be available after that, is a panel on management implications where we can bring some of these questions and have like Bruce and Jim and Jack and some of the silviculturalists in the group really kind of dig into how the plant associations concept gets used when it comes to this, long-term management at scale question. Robin.
Mary, I can probably throw in a relevant project that Jim has been a part of and I've been a part of, and the folks on the Lincoln. So the SSRP that we started back in 2018, that's a collaborative with the state of New Mexico for New Mexican spotted owl and doing forest management. So plant association keys are involved in that. And I could probably see if David Baker that drove it forward, he retired this last year, if he would speak as well. So that if we're looking for real world management where they're actually going to start putting boots on the ground here in the near future after 8 years, that might be an interesting one because it's current.
That's
And
great.
yeah. And I'm actively working on that project in August. I'll be down there in the Lincoln.
Okay.
So
Yeah. We'll look at the calendar closely and see if we can get Jim involved. If we can't, we'll just move forward without him and get it on the schedule after he's not available. So, um, all right. Any other thoughts about how to move this forward and make sure that you guys are feeling prepped and ready to lead a class? Did anybody have a chance to follow up with Bruce? And is anyone planning to go out to Arizona for his class the first week of August? Okay, because that is a option he made available, is if a person or two wanted to join him, he was open to helping out there. Okay. Um, Thank you, Grace, for offering to kind of be a central location for grabbing stuff. Do we still want to do the email thing where we're also sharing stuff, or do you want to have people send it directly to Grace and then have everyone be responsible for going to that link? Was your email getting inundated today, or is that a appropriate amount of receiving material?
I don't mind receiving so many emails, but it's harder for me to go back into it and look for resources. So I like the idea of just a location we can all reference personally.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And will you know what's in that reference if you haven't seen it? Or like, is the email useful for like making you aware that it exists and then you can find it on the Gmail side, or are you not going to look for a reference until you need something and you hope you can find what you need there?
Yeah, for me, it's that, Mary. I'll look there when I need to find something. Often when emails come to me, I can't look at them right now because I'm doing something else, so I put them aside. So having that one stop reference document would be great.
Okay.
Maybe if people are attaching links to that Google Doc, just adding a little description of what the link is for and what it's good for might help with that issue.
Okay, that sounds great. Then we will, from henceforth, ask people to put their references, send their references to Grace if they can't put them into the Google Doc themselves. Okay. Any other questions? I have not. I need to coordinate with the Jemez Ranger District and with Walatoa before I send out a meeting location. But I was thinking about the meeting time. If we're meeting in the Jemez, is 9 o'clock a functional time to meet? Does that give people travel time to get to the Jemez?
10 would be so nice. Does it get real hot over there? Does it get that hot? It's not like
Well, it's not about hot. It's about if we go at 10, then we're like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the field before we quit. So it's just having that brain time. But
9:30.
we could do 9:30.
Sold.
Sold. And then generally what we like to do is have people do as much carpooling as they can. And if you can do that before you get there, great, but we'll try to find a parking lot where we can leave some vehicles for the day and then plan to come back to that parking lot so that we can, you know, not have as many vehicles. But I also get it that if we're like head out to the Dome Road or something and someone wants to head back to Santa Fe and doesn't want to go back to Jemez Springs, that they may be driving themselves that day. So we'll come up with a game plan with SD and Jim about where they want to show what they want to show people. So okay. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Well, thank you guys. And so today was a little bit shorter, but the idea is that we take as long as we need to cover the topic and don't try to drag it out. All right.
Thanks,
I'm gonna
Mary.
stop
Thank you, Mary.
recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and did
Mary.
that work for the